Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
I know, and I fully respect people's opinion about it, that some of the material said the next canon part of it, okay, but like from the filmmaking world that I was brought into, the TV series, the films were it.
Obviously, we have hundreds of books and comics and everything you could possibly imagine. So, you know, I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and, you know, I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and make great movies.
We ended up doing a video about declaring everything prior to A New Dawn Legends, and everything forward is, you know, part of the Lucasfilm Story Group era, so to speak. But basically, what it means now is that there are people in the story group that have an eye on everything that is going on in other parts of the franchise, films, TV, other things, toys, action figure, the backs of the cards even, the video games. They have all these things that they're aware of, and so they can actually cue us into opportunities and things to avoid. And that's, you know, that is something that did happen before.
They become the people that are just making sure everything lines up.
Well, librarians, they don't.
Yeah, I like that better.
They don't have to be listened to. Right. Apparently, the movie makers get to do whatever they want to. We novelists.
And then they got to figure it out.
And then they've got to kind of spackle it, whatever.
The original saga was about the father, the children, and the grandchildren. And I mean, that's not a secret to anybody. It's even in the novels and everything.
We had to lay down some ground rules. And the most important rule was something called continuity. All these stories had to be consistent with the movies, but also consistent with each other. Otherwise, the integrity of the mythology would be stripped away.
We controlled it very tightly. And that was one of my mandates, because when I began the spin-off publishing program, it was a sacrosanct rule that everything had to relate to each other, be consistent with each other, and of course be consistent with the movies, which were canon.
George has been quoted, he said the three pillars of Star Wars are himself, you, meaning marketing, and the fans. Does your role with Lucasfilm licensing really require you to create Star Wars canon and fill in the blanks for George? How does that all work?
What that meant was that, you know, George is well in control of the movies and the TV shows, and that's his world. So he calls himself the father,
mm-hmm.
and the world outside of that is way too big for him to personally supervise. And he's entrusted that to me, and he calls me the son in that holy trilogy.
And at that time, you know, George Lucas was actually going through, and he read the outline and made a couple of notes and basically said, "This sounds really cool." And you know, we were able to go ahead and move through the process. They had a couple of queries for George Lucas, and he went through and answered all the queries, and he ended up really being very nice about the whole thing. I don't think I had any major changes. You know, the little kinds of things that I had were just like minor one-line edits, you know, take out this line or that line or something like that.
We also know that the really big changes are not in the cards. We know that he's not going to run off in the next year or 2 or 5 or 10 and defeat Darth Vader and the Emperor. It's gonna be a while. The other thing about Qui-Gon, yes, that is a canon issue. It is established that he was not actually able to get a response from Qui-Gon until later on, after he knows who Darth Vader is.
I had the script for the film, and I also had the ear of George Lucas on that one. So any time that I had a question about, you know, a character, or I needed permission to take the story in a certain direction, I'd have that input from him. At that time, there was no background for Grievous, so that was, you know, supposed to be one of the that originally was an important part of the commissioning, my being commissioned for that novel and creating a background for Grievous. But I had George's input on that too. Because I said I could, I said I could take this in any number of ways. Is there anything that you were thinking about Grievous in terms of his background? And he gave me a few things that allowed me to sort of expand on the character and give him a little bit of background.
The second group of episodes in the animated series leads right up to the events that happen in the film. So we get a little background on what was going on right before episode 3.
When we first did Grievous in chapter 20, we had very little information about him. He was just being conceived as a main villain for episode 3. But for this, we had to really explore him more. And George kind of told me about, he had some thoughts about that he was like an old-style villain where he fights, but then when he's losing, he runs away. We had a lot of discussions about lightsabers. How does he know to use lightsabers? Because it's supposed to be like a special gift, and you're supposed to be force sensitive. George kind of told me, maybe Count Dooku teaches him.
How often must I tell you? Control my central line. Good. I've been trained in your Jedi arts by Count Dooku.
And then we got a call that they wanted to introduce Grievous's cough earlier because our character didn't have it, so we somehow had to maybe link the two together better. And so eventually we ended up doing a little sequence at the maybe 2 weeks before we had to deliver of Mace going out and crushing Grievous's chest, and that's what gives us the connection that all of a sudden he starts coughing.
George is all about, fundamental gameplay, and so immediately when he saw that was what we were going to do.
He allowed us to give Darth Vader a secret apprentice, which from a canon standpoint is just fantastic. It is such a rich character opportunity.
Lucasfilm said, hey, we noticed this anomaly. Can you fix it? Can you find something that will clear this up? And for Tim and me, it was a lot of fun to go through and say, okay, we can rationalize this. Because, that's what writers do anyway. But, it would be, we're getting to fix canon. Holy crap, this is so cool. That's just a rumor that has kind of crawled up through fandom for years and years and years. I know that Tim met George Lucas. They had a sit-down conversation before the first book was done. I know that as with any of the novels, everything is cleared through Lucasfilm, and 100% for anything as major as a love interest being developed for Luke. That's a decision that George would have given a yes or no on.
One of the most recent things was the reintroduction of Thrawn back into the canon storytelling, pool.
Are there any personal favorite characters you'd like to see return to canon from the EU, such as Mara Jade, Talon Karrde, Gilad Pellaeon, etc.?
Yep, all of them. As far as I'm concerned, you could bring all of my other books back into canon and there'd be no conflicts, no bringing back or no having to tweak anything.
So at this point, then, Heir to the Empire still could fit into canon?
You could bring it back. Again, if it's not overwritten, you can kind of pretend it still exists.
There was a long stretch between the first time you wrote Thrawn in Heir to the Empire and the new canon.
Yes.
Did you have more plans involving Nuso Esfa before new canon happened?
No. The readers really want Thrawn back in, but everybody else doesn't even know who he is. And everything after that is canon. So yes, Thrawn is canon. Just putting him into Rebels also brought him back into canon, but yes.
I have to ask though, how does it feel to go from being canon to pretty soon you're not going to be canon anymore? Is that a strange feeling to you?
I don't know what they're going to do. There's no reason they have to destroy the expanded universe.
We might just have to start thinking it as an alternate universe that we love.
Might have to. We might have to think of it as some historian really screwed up looking through the records.
You write something and it becomes part of the canon, and before Disney took it over, canon was different. And so they said, no, you can't do this because somebody in one of the books said this and we're stuck with it. So, okay, fine, I can understand that that's what it is. They actually mentioned it in the show, and that brought me back into canon because otherwise I'm a legend writer. Shadows is a legend story, although they're starting to bring pieces of it back into the thing. So I'll eventually get back to canon status. As writers came along, as the series progressed, as the books came along, we were all given a CD
which was basically a compendium of everything that we knew about Star Wars that we could use and what we couldn't use. And you had to use that as the background. They call it the holocron.
So if you had any questions about anything in Star Wars, you just call up Leland Cheat. He knew.
Leland Cheat was my continuity guy. He knew all the stuff about that. And so if I had a question, there was a problem, if I wrote something down, Leland would catch it, and he would come back and say, okay, here's the problem. Okay, good, I can do that. I can fix it. I'm not going to mess up anything.
But the fact is that, Lucas creates this great toy and lets us play with it. And, of course, there's some strictures. There's some things you can't do. That's the questions that any fan would ask when you're watching a movie. What are you thinking? What's going on in your head? Why are you doing this stuff? And I got to answer those questions. And it's like, how cool is that?
Canon, George Lucas dictates, what happens in the movies, and he's also contributing to the series. So that's always going to be at the top. Everything else falls right underneath that. It's official. It's part of the official canon. Everything is canon. The novels, the comics, the video games. It's all there. But George is on.
So you're saying then that all the movies, all the novels, the comics, and everything also considered part of the canon as well?
Most of them.
Some exceptions.
You got some, things like Marvel Comics for a period were sort of being disregarded for a long period of time. And we eventually brought that back. We've actually taken stuff that was less canon before and made it more canon in recent years, and we'll try to continue to do so. We want it to be a continuous, one single universe where everything, we try to make things fit as well as possible. And then when things crop up, we take it case by case.
The continuity, it was a bit controversial, but it got rebooted, kind of wiped clean, which I think is a good thing. And now moving forward, fingers crossed, everything is just kind of smooth from here on out. It should all line up across.
That's definitely the goal. Also, but when we start with the new stuff, it's just sort of refreshing because having a clean slate, you have so much less baggage.
Yeah.
In those days, there was none of this kind of canon wars stuff that came about later on.
Right.
It was all canon. Everything published was canon.
For me, I can almost dismiss that Legends banner. I just have my own sense of the saga, the way it's played out, sort of almost like an alternative history. So all those stories are still in my head, and I think it's going to take more than a banner on a book to make me change my mind about what Tim Zahn did or what Mike Stackpole did or, what any of us have done.